You have embraced the denial. What?
I have embraced the denial. I have found that misery is optional. If you just refuse to engage, everything is fine.
Okay, we don't have any context for this, but welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. I look forward to hearing more about what you're talking about, Wayne.
Well, thanks. We're here. Darn it.
Well, let me introduce you. So, Wayne Turmel has been writing about how to develop communication and leadership skills for almost 26 years. He's taught and consulted at Fortune 500 companies and startups around the world. And for the last 18 years, he's focused on the growing need to communicate effectively in remote and virtual environments. That's a long time before it really became a big deal, or at least a hot topic. Okay, and let me get back to it. Boy, we're just like all over the place here already. And fun fact: in Wayne's early career, he was a stand-up comedian, and he's also the author of 5 novels, co-host of the Long-Distance Work-Life podcast. And he's here today to talk about the book Long Distance Leader: Revised Rules for Remarkable Remote and Hybrid Leadership. Okay, now officially, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Andrea.
What in the world? So when we got on, Wayne threw his hands up and I'm like, how you doing? He's like, ah. So what's going on?
It's a beautiful thing. The birds are singing. It is still under 100 degrees in Las Vegas, although it's early. That will change.
Yeah.
We got the book coming out in September, and we're helping people figure out what to do, and life is good, or at least beats the known alternatives.
Yeah. There's a saying in our family, it's still sitting up and taking nourishment.
See, the secret to happiness is low bars.
I mean, laughing and you're not, but that's true. It's true.
The Buddha will tell you that happiness is the lack of desire. So, there's a million ways to look at this.
So, Wayne, congratulations on this new book. That's not completely new. It's a revised version, right?
Yes.
Original
version of Long Distance Leader came out in 2018.
Okay.
And you may have noticed things have changed a little since then.
Yeah, just a few years, but just a huge transformation in the market and what people are experiencing at work.
Sure.
Why don't we just start with kind of the basic, why did you guys write this book in the first place, with the initial book?
Yeah, it's funny. As you kindly pointed out, have been really focused on remote and hybrid work for a very long time. I've worked on hybrid teams my entire life, my entire adult grown-up career. And so I realized that while things like WebEx and early day tools like that were coming up, nobody was teaching anybody how to use them effectively. And so that became kind of an area of expertise. And for a number of years, I had my own consultancy doing that. And then about 10 years ago, Kevin bought my company. And Kevin and I had known each other for a very long time. He is a very smart guy, established leadership expert in the kind of traditional leadership stuff that you would think of. And he was getting a lot of requests for remote stuff, and I was getting a lot of requests for leading remote teams. And rather than invent 2 separate wheels, we smushed our companies together. And so we decided that what we needed to do was, we had been teaching and talking about this, and we needed to codify this. Remote work has been around a very long time. Genghis Khan ruled half the world and never held a WebEx meeting. Working in the office is no guarantee things are going to be great. Julius Caesar did great out in the field. It's when he came back to the office that things kind of went pear-shaped.
Yeah.
So we decided this book, we were getting so many questions, and we could see remote work this is 2008, growing at 30% a year. Companies were thinking about putting policies in place, and the government was instituting what was charmingly known as telework uh, at the time. And then COVID hit. So we were standing on that corner for a long time. And then, COVID kind of pushed everybody across the Rubicon. And so we have been, I can't get enough historical references in one sentence, by the way, clearly. Um, but we got pushed across the Rubicon, and now, the first edition was in 7 languages. But as you pointed out, the world is a slightly different place than it was in 2018. And so the book needed to be updated.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. I am curious about the frameworks in the book and what you want to tell us about them. So I know that there was an original framework and then you added a framework for the second book. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
those?
the framework for the book was pretty straightforward. The subtitle of the first one was Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership, and there were 18 rules. Uh, Technically 19, but 19 was when in doubt, refer to rule number 1, which is think leadership first, location second. And so we had each of these rules and we kind of built. And then when we looked at it the second time, we said, well, do the rules need to change? And not really. The rules are the same. What has changed are really 2 things. One is the technology clearly is different than it was in 2018. When we wrote the book, Zoom literally did not exist. And
Yeah.
then it went from what's Zoom to a verb
Yeah.
to a syndrome in like 18 months.
Syndrome.
Right? We went from I don't even know what Zoom is to I have Zoom fatigue, turn off the camera.
Right.
And that happened in a very short period of time. The other technology thing, I mean, when we wrote the book, Skype for Business was a big deal. Skype for Business no longer exists. It has been morphed into Teams, and Teams has eaten up everybody's life to huge so we needed to address that without getting bogged down in the technology, right? We're not saying use this tool, don't use this tool, but the tools fit into certain categories, and you need to know what the tools are in order to do your job. The second thing that changed is the rise of hybrid work, which has been kind of interesting. And I have to be very careful not to go too far down the rabbit hole without permission on this. But what we had sort of hybrid work in the before times. Some people were working from home, some people weren't. Somebody's kid was sick, they got to work from home. I need to finish this project. Let me get out of the office so I can concentrate. That stuff was going on, but it wasn't really a plan, right? And it just been kind of negotiated and evolved, and it was kind of messy, but it was sort of working.
And there wasn't
And
enough
then,
of it to need rules for those things. Yeah.
yeah, exactly right. It's like we can continue to bump along, or we can look at what we know is working and just use those as a roadmap.
Yeah.
After COVID, the genie was out of the bottle. I mean, a lot of people who didn't think they could work remotely discovered that they could. Productivity did not drop. Employee engagement in some cases actually went up because people who are less miserable stay engaged. And as we started to go back to the office, it was kind of 3 buckets, right? There was well, this remote thing is great, we're going to do that. And then there was, nope, we're going back to the before times. It's like the last 2 years never happened. Get your butts back in the office. And then there's, well, we're going to come up with a hybrid situation. And most people who are working in hybrid teams are not really, it's not so much a strategy as it is a hostage negotiation.
Okay. Say more.
Well, a strategy is we know what we're doing it for a specific reason, we're going to figure out different rules. And a hostage negotiation is how much can we make them come back to the office before they quit? And how much can I refuse to go back into the office before they fire me And so we will come to some kind of compromise. In the office, a couple days a week is the most common.
Yeah.
And that can work, right? Compromises are fine. Everybody's kind of semi-satisfied and the work gets done, and so what? But a hybrid, a true hybrid, is two things coming together to create a third entity. The classic example is a mule. A mule is a horse and a donkey, but as an old farm boy, if you've ever met a mule, you know that it is neither a horse nor a donkey. It is its own unique thing with its own set of strengths and weaknesses. Real hybrid work is not just, well, we'll be in the office some days and others. It's not just what work gets done where, it introduces the element of time. Hybrid work says, there are some things that we need to be together for.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things we don't. I mean, the problem with coming back to the office and 3 days a week is people complain, I can't get any work done. I come into the office and people want to talk to me, and it's Alice's birthday, so there's cake in the break room, and there's noise. And then the people who are trying to work from home are constantly on Zoom meetings because the people that are all together want to talk to them. Hybrid work says, you know what? There are times when synchronous work needs to happen. And there are times when I don't care. If you're working on that report and you want to do it at 10 o'clock at night because that's when your brain works, as long as it is in my inbox Monday morning, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Finding that correct mix of synchronous and asynchronous, and then finding ways as a leader to negotiate that is really kind of the next wave. And so what we did in the book, and man, I didn't take long enough to answer that question, did I? Uh, what we did in the book was just take a look at, yeah, COVID's over, but if you have one member of your team who isn't there, you have a remote team. Is your hybrid team really operating at peak efficiency? Have you built a
Mm.
hybrid, or have you just kind of smushed everything together and hope nobody quits?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. I totally agree that it's so important to make sure that the time that you have face to face is worth it, whether that be on Zoom or in person.
Yeah.
That it's all worth it. That you made it. Yeah. Not that you can't have cake in the break room, and that can be worth it. But
Yeah, there are advantages to
yeah,
that.
there's definitely, but like being intentional about it, certainly.
It's funny, Kevin and I have, since we wrote the book, we've won all these, best remote thinker awards and all that stuff, which is lovely, but it dumps us into the remote work zealot
Mm-hmm.
pot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never really our intention. I mean, certainly there are advantages to working remotely. I've done it most of my career. Um, I dig it. I think if you're going to do it right.
Yeah.
And there is no one size fits all, especially right now because it's the Wild West out there. Nobody knows what's going to work. My personal belief, Kevin disagrees with me, but you're talking to me right now. Um, my personal belief is we are going through the biggest shift in the workplace since probably the 1920s.
Hmm.
In the 1920s, we had the rise of trade unions. We had the 40-hour work week became standard. People started getting cars so they could commute to the office. So yeah, there was a big change in how people worked and what it meant to work, right? Companies had hierarchies that were more or less the same since then. And now, because of tools that allow us to work, uh, American workers basically get no perks anymore. So the number one requested perk in the workplace is flexibility of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we are going through, and it's not settled yet. Just because COVID has calmed down doesn't mean, and by calm down, I don't mean gone. I just mean it's
Right.
calmed down. Um, we are still figuring out now what's next. What does it mean to work for an employer? What is my responsibility as an employer to the people I hire, what are the responsibilities of me as an employee to my boss? And we're figuring that out right now. So if
Yep.
we can give a little guidance, a little common sense, a little think about this,
Yeah.
that's what we hope to do with the new version.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I know a lot of leaders who are leading remote teams or hybrid teams are struggling with, or leaders in companies who are debating how to handle this issue in general. Um, how do we make it fair? Which really means how do we make it so that nobody complains? So that we're not dealing with a
Well,
lot of
good luck with
complaining.
that.
I
Good luck
know.
with that. As long as
I
you're
know it's
hiring
tough.
humans. I
It
mean,
is.
there's a bell curve, right? It's like, well, people who work at home get stuff done. Well, there's some that don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Newsflash, you got people that show up in the office every day who don't do a darn thing. So,
Right.
there's always going to be, and as human beings, we tend to manage to the exception.
Right. Well, and there's also people who are, saying, well, now I don't have to commute 45 minutes to work. And then the people that are working or living closer to headquarters are saying, but just because I don't have a commute doesn't mean that I don't want to work at home or what, you know what I mean? Like there's all those kinds of
Well,
questions. So I'm curious about your take based on your books,
mhm,
in this particular book, on how a leader can kind of help bring some leadership
yeah,
really to that big issue, that
yeah.
big struggle that they're having.
It sounds simplistic. Uh, when we wrote the book, one of the pieces of feedback that we got lovely reviews and people liked the book and all that stuff. But they said, well, there's a lot in here that's just management 101, right? It's not specific to remote. And our response to that was, yes, that is correct. As I said, the first rule in the book is think leadership first, location second. We created a model in the book, which is not terribly scientific. If you picture three gears kind of grinding together to get the work done, right? Three gears and out comes the work. The biggest gear by far is the leadership and management piece. That's what we do as leaders. Well, think about the role of a leader. You set the vision, you establish goals, you set expectations, you delegate. Yep, you do all that stuff. Whether you're in the office or not, all of that stuff has to happen. So if you are a good leader, if you are thinking about doing your job as a leader, you'll probably find a way to make this happen, regardless of where people are working. What we do as leaders hasn't changed particularly. What has changed is because not everybody is in the same place at the same time, we are now connected through technology, which has a number of very important effects. The first is that we are hardwired for visual and proximate communication. Right? So think about a hybrid team. You've got some people who are in the office all the time. You see them all the time. You talk to them all the time. They have access to you. The people who are remote have a harder time getting your attention. There are conversations that are being had in the office that they aren't privy to. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
biggest dangers to engagement for remote employees is being excluded.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's intentional, and most often it's not. It's
Yeah.
not that we're not including you in the conversation intentionally. We just didn't think about it.
And you're just not here.
You're not here. You're literally out of sight and out of mind.
Yeah.
That is not a malicious thing, but it can be kind of malignant if you are not cognizant of that. And as a leader, proximity bias is a problem, right? People in the office get the cool assignments and they get access to you anytime they want. And
Yep.
there is evidence that remote workers perceive, true or not, but perceive that they don't get the same quantity or quality of feedback that they got when they were in the office. So those are just some kind of examples of how the leader needs to be aware of the dynamic in order to do the stuff they've always done, which is include and coach and do all the things we need to do. But if you're not aware of that
Mhm.
dynamic, it's really easy. The other thing is technology allows you to do amazing things, and it allows you to do bad things really easily. The worst example that I can think of, the best worst example I can think of, is my wife was once fired by instant messenger. I think we can agree that firing somebody by instant messenger gets the job done. I mean, she was unemployed at the end of the interaction.
Mhm.
So, check, move on. We can also agree it's a pretty crummy way for humans to deal with each other.
Definitely.
Now, that is obviously a horrible example. But let's take one that's a little more relevant and forgivable. It's the end of Thursday. You're tired. You have to give Bob some feedback. And God, you know what he's like. So you just send him an email. You know that feedback probably should have been delivered in a richer way. But man, it got it off my plate and I didn't have to deal with Bob. And so there you go. And that's huge. Um, I am obsessed with a fact. You may have figured out I'm a history geek. I am obsessed with the fact that since the introduction of email, and this is a big deal, my first project in the big boy business world was rolling out email to my company. I've been in the business world exactly that long. In that 30-ish years, for the first time in human history, 70% of our work is now done in writing. Emails, chat messages, texts, documents, whatever. That has never happened. And we know that communicating in writing is different than communicating one-on-one across a desk. Doesn't mean email is evil, doesn't mean you shouldn't communicate in text. It allows a lot of things to happen that could never happen otherwise. And if you've ever spent 3 days apologizing for an email that it took 30 seconds to send, you know that it is not perfect.
Right. It's not always, the ROI isn't always great.
The ROI is not always great. So one of the things in the book is you have to choose the right communication tool for the right
Yeah.
message and use it in the right way.
Mhm.
And we have a matrix, which is not our invention. Somebody invented it 20 years ago, a balance of richness versus scope. So if I'm having a coaching conversation with you, just sending you feedback in an email is not as effective as being on Zoom, which is not as effective as having a cup of coffee and sitting down together,
Right.
right? On the other hand, hey, there's cake in the break room. I don't need to go to every person in the room and go, there's cake in the break room. You send out a message and it's done. So choosing the right tool for the right job is really key to the leader's job in a remote or hybrid work environment. When do we call a meeting? Um, you know, I mean, we've talked about this already. When do I think it's important for us to get to the office? And when we're in the office together, do we use that time to do the stuff that it makes sense to do together? A lot of hybrid teams have moved to no meeting Fridays. And shockingly, people kind of dig that. I mean, obviously, if there's an emergency, you can pick up the phone or whatever. But the idea is if I'm working at home today, working at home alone is really conducive to checking stuff off the list. Man, you can get the little things done in a hurry. That stuff doesn't get done great in a crowded office full of people, but you know what does? The conversations, the getting questions answered, the team building and the relationship building. That stuff gets done. So we're going to do that when we're in the office.
Mhm. Yeah. And the in-depth, thinking stuff is nice to have that block time for too. Yeah. I thrive in Like when I'm designing my days, I do the same thing. I'm like, okay, am I going to be interacting with people today, even if it is in meetings on Zoom, or am I going to be head down getting stuff done? And I try to actually really separate that. It
Yeah.
helps with productivity
Yeah.
for sure.
And again, one of the things people said to us, the people that have been working remotely for a long time, when they read Long Distance Leader, went, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like everything else. The people that are doing it don't understand that not everybody is doing this. Not
Right.
everybody thinks that way. Not everybody is, I mean, the poor extroverts,
Mhm.
when everybody got sent home, oh my Lord, the suffering
Yeah. Yeah.
that people went through, which accounted for the boom in Zoom because they were like, okay, even if it's on webcam, dear God, let me talk to a human being. The introverts, on the other hand, were perfectly fine, thank you.
Yeah.
While to some people, this is all common sense. And, they said, well, this is leadership 101. Yeah, if you're doing the leadership stuff. But if you're not doing the leadership stuff, at least when we were all together, you'd occasionally do the right thing just on instinct,
Hmm.
right? You see somebody and go, well, I should give them feedback. Now that I don't see them, maybe I'm not giving them as much feedback as they need.
When you don't do it in that kind of immediate off the cuff setting, it can become like a bigger deal.
Well, it is. I mean, this sounds stupid because I've timed it. It takes 5 seconds to add a good morning, how's your day to the front of a chat message. Not everybody does it. Communication, particularly written communication, in a virtual environment can become extremely transactional.
Yeah.
Hey, send me that file. Here's your file. That's the end of the communication, right? I don't know how your kids are. I don't know what kind of day you're having. I don't get a chance to make my silly little jokes and maybe see a smile on your face. And, you know, that stuff is what builds relationships. That's why when they say remote work doesn't build relationships, it's because, yeah, if it's purely transactional, you're right. And again, what's the leader's role in that, right? The
Right.
role is to create opportunities for people to engage. The role is to take some of those people who are in the office and say, if you're working on this, you really ought to involve Andrea. And it's not that they don't want to work with Andrea, they just never thought about it.
Do you have any tips, or is there a rule about that sort of thing, about getting to know everybody on the team, understanding everybody's roles, those sorts of
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't looked at the list of rules in a moment, so I can't remember if there's an explicit rule around that. But
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. We just had some turnover on our team, and so we hired a new person. And that person's first job, first assigned task, was to reach out to every other member of the team and set up a half-hour uh, one-on-one Zoom call. And it was only supposed to be partly about work. Which
Mm,
makes sense. If you're the new guy and once you get past what do you do and where are you,
yeah.
right? That conversation is going to evolve. Hey, I really like that plant behind you. Where did you go to school? Oh my gosh, I got kids too. Those types of conversations that happen organically in the office don't happen organically because think about what most onboarding looks like for new remote team members. There's a team meeting. Hi, everybody. This is Alice. Alice says a little bit about her, and the meeting goes on. And
Yeah.
I may not have a chance to cross paths with Alice till the next meeting. I'm not building a relationship. I'm not helping her. I'm not getting a sense of where she can help me.
No context
No
for,
context. It's
yeah.
just, oh, we got this new person on the team.
Yeah.
So when somebody joins our team, I may never deal with Erica in graphics. I'm going to have a conversation with Erica in graphics.
Hmm.
And I may find that, hey, I like this person, or we have something in common, or they give, she gives me some insight to the company that I wouldn't get from somebody else. That is a very simple thing. Yes, it takes time. I mean, if you want to do the math, it's 12 people times a half hour each, and most of the conversations run long. right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's an investment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Give you another example if we got a minute. Kevin did something. Kevin is way better at this than me. Just full disclosure. We have a monthly team meeting. All the team is on there. It's an all hands meeting. And it always starts with an icebreaker of some kind. And I am a curmudgeonly old guy who hates icebreakers, right? If you were a tree, what kind of tree? Ugh, kill me. But I play nice and we all know each other and it's fun. But he did this one where he said, what's your favorite candy? Now, if you put a gun to my head, I could not figure out what's my favorite candy got to do with work. But I will be nice and play along. So everybody gave their favorite candy. About 3 weeks later, this package arrives on my doorstep. No name, no attribution, just a 3-pound bag of gummy bears arrives on my porch. And it's summer in Las Vegas, so I got to take it inside before it becomes one giant gummy bear, right? And so I take it in, and I don't know who sent it to me. I don't, but we started saying, "Hey, did you get a package today?" With the little Slack messages firing back and forth. And it turned out that Kevin had, in fact, recorded everybody's favorite candy and sent them a big batch of it.
Oh, that's funny.
Now, did it expressly make the business better? I mean, it cost him money. But you know what? We communicated with each other. And then next time I was talking to Amy, it was like, okay, what did you get?
It's
And
a shared experience of some
it was
kind.
a shared experience
Yeah.
that was fun. It was non-threatening.
Yeah.
It didn't matter whether you were in a position of authority over somebody else. Everybody loves candy. What did you get? It was a really cool thing.
Mm.
And we often forget to do those kind of things when we aren't all together. It's easy to bring in cake, right? Pizza at the staff meeting. Yay. Pizza at the staff meeting on a hybrid team can actually be a little corrosive because everybody in the room is eating pizza and I'm on the West Coast and it's 9 in the morning and I'm watching people eat pizza.
Yeah.
So that big gear, that big leadership and management thing is not all that different than it's ever been. And the differences need to be acknowledged and need to be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a fun example. And the idea of having shared experiences is one of the hardest things about remote to me, and hybrid work is just that feeling of disconnect because we don't have those things. And so finding ways to do that seems really important.
It is. And it's funny. Sometimes it can be as simple as we use Slack. You can use Microsoft Teams. Doesn't matter
Hmm.
what tool you're using. But one of the things we have is a water cooler channel. Everybody says, well, what you miss at work is the water cooler conversation. Well, we have a place for water cooler conversations. And it's things like yesterday, I put a little in the channel because it was National Fresh Breath Day.
Fresh breath.
It was
That's good.
National Fresh Breath Day. And so I put that out there and said, now that we all work remote, this isn't such a big deal, but and then and somebody else responds, and before that it was somebody you know somebody's grandkid was visiting and there was baby pictures and everybody got to ooh and ah and do all that stuff. We had a tragedy on the team recently
Mm.
and we used that channel to kind of keep everybody informed, but also keep their spirits up and
Mm.
let everybody know that we had each other's backs and all of that stuff. Um, and so it can happen. Now there is something on hybrid teams. This is more of a challenge than it is on remote teams, ironically, because on remote teams, everybody's remote. And so
Hmm.
everybody's dealing with the same set of rules.
Right.
What often happens, because people are aware of these dynamics, and so they make a point of talking to each other and creating experiences. The nuclear team, think nuclear team like nuclear family, right? Mom, dad, and the kids. The nuclear team, manager and direct reports, gets really tight and really strong, and they develop their own language and their own culture, but they're not interacting with the other parts of the organization as much as they were. And you don't know Alice in accounting, and you don't
Mm.
bump into Bob in the elevator and go, oh my God, you know what? We don't have those conversations. So, as an organization, if you're looking at hybrid or remote work, how do we create that? Right? Once we take care of our nuclear team and we know we're solid, how do we then build relationships, find ways to work together, get to know each other, share information outside of the nuclear family in the rest of the organization?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So, any last thing that you want to say about the book?
The long distance leader is the cornerstone to the entire set of books, Long Distance Teammate, Long Distance Team. But really, if you are a leader who has team members who don't all work in the same location, it's a gut check. It's, there are 18 rules, he says, going to the book really quickly. And it's things like leading requires a focus on others' outcomes and ourselves. Uh, Building trust at a distance doesn't happen by accident. It's a gut check, right? Am I doing those things? And if you are, great. We love that, right? The best feedback we can get is, oh, I'm doing all this stuff. Great. You're probably a good leader and your team is rocking it. Sometimes it's, I'm not doing any of this stuff. Okay, that's great. The third bucket is where most of us are. And that's, oh, yeah, that's right. I should be doing that. Or we used to do that, but we got away from it. And if it gives you a little bit of a nudge or a kick or however you need to be propelled to do what you're doing,
Yeah.
that's the purpose,
Yeah. It
right?
sounds like,
A classic example is agendas for meetings.
mm,
Do you do one for every meeting? Probably not. How are your meetings? Not so great. What if you did an agenda? Right? It's that kind of thing that I think is the sweet spot for the book. It's what
mm,
people find most relevant and compelling and useful, frankly.
mhm. Great. So, where can people find you in your book?
It's a book. Where do you buy your books? Because trust me, it's everywhere. It's from a real publisher. It's from Barrett Kohler. So, you know, yes, you can find it on Amazon in all three formats, basically paperback, ebook, audio. There is, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Chapters if you're in Canada, wherever you happen to be. Wherever you buy books, you can find the sucker. Now, to find us, you can go to kevinikenberry.com/LDL, long distance leader. You'll find some special offers. You'll find all kinds of stuff about the book. But kevinikenberry.com is really the place to find everything that we do, not just around long distance leadership, but everything that we do. It's the easiest way to find us. And I'm on LinkedIn. Track me down. I'm not hard to find.
Great. And I'm sure that we can book you for stand-up comedies too, right?
Oh, Lord, no. I hung that sucker up. May 6th, 1996 was the last. And fortunately, with the exception of one evening at the Improv, my entire career was pre-internet. So you'll just have to take my word for it. No, no, no. I hung it up. I'm in the big boy world now.
Well, and I guess you've also written a bunch of novels. And so I mean, that's pretty cool too. I was gonna just wrap this up with my last question, but let me ask one more question before that last question. And that
The
is,
penultimate question. That's a great
yeah,
word, isn't it?
like
Penultimate.
there's something really special about having other forms of self-expression besides your work
Yes.
and artistic expression. And so clearly that's something that you have tapped into for yourself. And I'm just kind of curious, what kind of impact do you think that has on you and your work and your life?
Well, on my life, it saved me from going crazy. I mean,
Mm,
we all know that people who have been in the arts and have to walk away from it, I ran away from the circus to feed the wife and children. Um, there's always that part of you that craves that,
yeah.
right? That outlet, and trying to smother it and just say, no, I'm a big boy now, um, is why people lose their minds and snap, frankly. I'm very lucky in that when I was in the real world, I still, I was performing in a sense. So I got that out of my system. And it turned out I was pretty good at it, at the training thing. But I also found an outlet in writing articles. And then somebody asked me to write a chapter for a book. And then I started writing my own books. And that was all in the nonfiction business space. And then I reached 50, and my midlife crisis was, even though I've been writing my entire life, I'll never be a real writer until I do a novel. And that was my first novel. And it turns out that not only is that a great sense of expression, I could say all the things I can't say during the day when I have to be a grown up, but it's also my social life. I hang with other writers. I'm active in the writing community here in Las Vegas. And so it keeps me sane while allowing me to go a little crazy. In terms of how it relates to the work, I'm a storyteller, right? I think people learn better when they are relaxed and having fun than when they're not.
Yeah.
It's not that the topic isn't important. I think treating your people well is really important. The way in which you learn those lessons, if I can present it in a way that you haven't heard it before, or in a way that gives you a chuckle of recognition and go, oh, yeah, I guess I did that, don't I? Without beating you over the head, then that's what I bring to the party.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so one last question for you. What last piece of advice would you want to give to somebody who wants to have a voice of influence?
If you're going to have a voice of influence, you need to understand why they are doing what they do now. The moment I became a grown up in the business world was the moment that I realized that people don't make decisions because they're selfish idiots who don't understand the reality of the situation. Companies make decisions, no matter how ridiculous we think they are, somewhere somebody had a good reason for doing that. There's a reason that, like, when you see a rule that you think is kind of silly, and then you stop and go, okay, what happened that they needed to make that rule? Like, I worked with a client who had chair safety training. And one of the reasons they had to have chair safety training as part of was because people would get on swivelly office chairs and try to change light bulbs, and somebody fell and really hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Well, do I need a full piece of training around how to use my chair safely? Probably not. But somebody needed to be told, don't stand on a chair and change a light bulb if the chair doesn't stay still.
Yeah.
So, understanding why the current situation exists goes a long way to helping you influence change. The biggest thing for me is it a good reason, or is it because we've always done it that way? Is it rational, or is it calcification?
Mm.
And I find that a lot of what we do because we've always done it that way. And it can be hard to change people's minds But if that's the only reason you do it, it's pretty easy to find a counter argument. Hey, there's a better, smarter way to do this. If they do it because this is the reason and there are safety reasons and legal reasons and oh, okay, then you're probably not going to get them to change and you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Oh, good, good. I love that. That is so important. And to even bring that as a question, like, okay, so why did you say that? Or why did you?
I will tell you, I almost got fired once for doing that too much.
Hmm.
I the company that I worked for got bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold. And during one of these, I got moved to Chicago and I was the stranger in the Chicago office. And, the new corporation brought me in, so I was suspect and evil and all of that. And my boss had to take me aside and go, "You're making people crazy." Because every time they would tell me this is how we do it, I would go, "Why? How did that happen? Who said so?" And it was a legitimate attempt to understand, right? Is
Yeah.
this bedrock or is it calcification? And I wasn't doing it particularly artfully.
Hmm.
And people were taking that as a personal challenge than a legitimate request for information.
Yeah. That's a great point. Well, it has been such a lovely conversation with you today, Wayne. Thank you so much for being on the show and good luck with your book.
Well, thank you so much. Kevin and I are very excited. Just a real pleasure to talk to you, Andrea, and to talk to your audience.